Good morning and welcome to Richard Raw's Daily Meditation from the Center of Action and Contemplation. The theme for this week is Contemplation and Racism, and the title of today's practice is Crying All the Way. And this is what Richard Raw begins with. African-American theologian and mystic, the Rev Dr Howard Thurman, played a pivotal role in the social and racial justice efforts of the 20th century. In this passage, he describes the contemplative and healing experience of a friend in the midst of crisis. While reading, I hope we will be moved to consider what we must face, even if we go through it crying all the way. And this is what Howard Thurman writes. A friend of mine was given an assignment in a class in dramatics. Each time she tried to read her selection aloud before class, tears came, and her strong emotional reaction made it impossible to go through it. One day the teacher asked her to remain after class for a conference. The essence of the teacher's word to her was this: "You must read the selection before the class tomorrow. I understand what is happening to you, and that is why I insist you do this tomorrow. It is important that you realize that you must read this selection through, crying every step of the way. Perhaps if you expect to read it through without crying. There are experiences through which we must go crying all the way, perhaps, if we are ever to go through them without crying, and to go through them without crying must be done. St. Francis of Assisi in his youth found it impossible to control his deep physical and emotional revulsion against leprosy. So acute was his reaction that he could not ever run the risk of looking at a leper. Shortly after he had made his first commitment to his Lord, he was riding down the road when suddenly there appeared a leper. Instinctively, he turned his horse around and went off galloping in the opposite direction, his whole body bathed in a nervous sweat. Then he realized what he was doing. Leprosy was one of the things he could not stand. As long as that was true, leprosy would be excuse me. Leprosy was one of the things he could not stand. As long as that was true, leprosy would be his jailer, his master. He turned around as abruptly as before, found the leper, and according to the story, remained with him, living intimately with him until every trace of his previous reaction had been mastered. Thus freed, he could be of tremendous service to the victims of the disease. There are many experiences which we face that are completely overwhelming. As we see them, they are too terrible even to contemplate, and yet we must face them and deal with them directly. To deal with the problem without the emotional upheaval is necessary if you are ever going to be able to manage it at all. There can be no more significant personal resolution than this: I will face the problem I have been putting off because of too much fear, of too many tears, of too much resentment, even if it means crying all the way through, in order that I may learn to deal with it without fear, tears, or resentment. That is the end of this morning's meditation.